You're an American citizen.
Yeah.
And you're being told you have to wait in line in the United States of America in favor of somebody who's not an American citizen, who crossed the border illegally, that is going to be treated better because it's a sanctuary city, that is LA, and a sanctuary state, that is California. How do you think that's going to vibe with most Americans? You can't have stuff like that happening and think that there's not going to be major noise and friction and polarization in the country when you let something like that happen.
Stephen A. Smith just dropped another absolute nuclear bomb on the Democratic establishment. And watching this play out in real time is nothing short of a cinematic takedown.
There is no way that that's going to fly. I think most Democrats know that. The problem is they've surrendered to the extreme progressive left because they're fearful that they will lose their power positions if they don't. I think that's what the problem is more so than anything else, and that's what's going on in our nation's capital.
When cultural powerhouses like Stephen A. Smith and Bill Maher start torching their own side, you know the political Titanic has already hit the iceberg. His blistering analysis exposes the exact reason the Democrats suffered a total electoral collapse. As always, hit that subscribe button to join the conversation and let's get into it. First, look at this footage for the necessary backstory. Then get ready for Stephen A.'s unapologetic reality check.
I think that there were 2 officers who were facing lacerations on their face.
Call for prosecution of those who pelted them?
Look, I've seen the videos of this snowball fight. I think that it was a snowball fight.
A snowball fight or assaulting cops?
I think it's a combination of both. They're law enforcement. They're not engaging in a snowball fight with you. They don't want to be bothered. If they're law enforcement and that's not something that they were entertaining, then assault would be the way to go. Now, obviously, if you just hit them with some sort of snowball or whatever the case may be, I mean, you didn't harm them or anything. That's entirely different. So there's different levels of assault.
What began as a moment of lighthearted winter fun in that clip quickly devolved into a high-stakes confrontation that carries massive political weight.
The act is the act itself, and the law enforcement wasn't capitulating to that kind of situation. Then we have to take that into consideration. And if they felt it was assault, then damn it was assault, plain and simple. But once again, this is something that comes back to bite Mamdani because he wasn't considered the strongest supporter of the NYPD as he was running for office.
On one hand, New Yorkers were initially embracing a rare, picturesque snowfall that turned the concrete jungle into a temporary playground. People were laughing and throwing snowballs to blow off steam after a brutal week of weather. But the atmosphere shifted instantly. A hostile faction emerged, deliberately pelting NYPD officers with ice, driven not by playfulness, but by a deep-seated contempt that resulted in actual injuries. This was no longer a game. It was a blatant assault on authority. When Zohran Mamdani was pressed on whether these attackers would face justice, he dismissed the violence as a mere snowball fight, leaving the public stunned. Now, stay tuned for Stephen A.'s fiery response to that dismissal.
When you listen to some of his rhetoric in the past, some of the things that he had said about the police didn't seem to be that keen on being supportive about them. I don't recall whether or not he was talking about defunding police, but I believe I believe he did say that. I believe he did say that. So because that's a reality, you know, when you see that kind of stuff, it sort of seems dismissive about concerns for law enforcement. And that is not a good position for him to be in, particularly when they're not getting raises or anything like that, because you don't have the money to take care of them, nor did you appear inclined to do so even if you did. So all of those things definitely work against him, and that's the kind of thing that can turn officers against you.
Stephen A. hits the bullseye here with zero apologies. There is no way to spin this. Mamdani built his career on the defund the police narrative. So hand-waving this chaos as harmless fun is the height of hypocrisy and a massive failure of leadership. Real officers were hurt. They were targeted with intent, and treating that like a joke sends a catastrophic message to the city. That attacking law enforcement is socially acceptable. That is a terrifying precedent to set in a metropolis already terrified of rising crime. Honestly, this is likely just the beginning. If it snowballs today, that same radicalized anger will be directed at the politicians tomorrow, including Mamdani himself. Once you lose the rule of law, clawing it back is a nightmare for everyone involved.
Did you see this AOC Mamdani video in Spanish?
Hola.
Mi español
no es el mejor.
No te preocupes, alcalde.
Okay, so they're talking about childcare for all, meaning illegals. So they are talking about illegals, number one. Now, we live in Miami. We're in Miami right now. I hear more Spanish than English outside of this studio basically all day long. So I don't have a problem with Spanish or Spanish speakers. However, speaking in another language while encouraging people who are not legal citizens to get city services, that seems a bit much for me.
This is the question on every taxpayer's mind right now. Where on earth do undocumented immigrants receive prioritized, taxpayer-funded healthcare without any strings attached? It is a massive flashing red light, especially when the current medical infrastructure is already collapsing under long wait times and skyrocketing premiums for legal residents. Flooding an already exhausted system without any limits is a recipe for total systemic failure. Critics have been sounding the alarm for years, warning that these compassionate policies ignore the math and dump the burden on citizens who are already struggling to survive. After years of the Biden-Harris administration allowing the border to spiral out of control, the push by Mamdani and AOC for even more radical subsidies could break our public systems permanently.
I can't knock that. What I would tell you is that if you're trying to cater to that particular audience, speaking their language doesn't hurt. So that's not a crime. You know, they're voted. There are folks in the Hispanic community that are voting, and when you talk in their language, it makes them a bit more receptive to you in terms of wanting to listen to what you have to say. And what parent doesn't want, you know, free preschool for 3-4 year olds, et cetera, et cetera. But I always harken back, and it's very important that I bring this up, because I remember when some people asked me, when you became so moderate, somewhat of a centrist per se, when did that happen for you? And I can't remember the year, but I remember when George W. Bush and Dick Cheney were in office. And I never forget, as long as I live, a reporter was talking to Dick Cheney, former Vice President of the United States, God rest his soul. He was talking to him about the polls were showing blah, 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 blah. He looked at the report and said, so?
Stephen A. believes it is time for Mamdani to kill the engine on his radical left experiments and steer the ship back toward the common sense middle. And make no mistake, Stephen A. isn't viewing a pivot as a sign of weakness. He sees it as a masterclass in strategic survival. Of course, moving toward the center would cause a meltdown among the progressive activists who first boosted Mamdani's profile. They'll scream sellout and betrayal. But Stephen A. is being realistic. Real leadership isn't about chasing likes from the fringe. It's about building long-term authority and mainstream appeal. By adopting a balanced platform, Mamdani could actually win over the moderates and independents who decide elections. More importantly, this shift could be the Democrats' only path to salvation in 2028, earning back the trust of a nation that is currently looking at them with total suspicion.
And I was eating my cereal. I was like, "What? What did he say?" Because I had never seen. I had never seen a vice president do that before. The president, he said, "So," and then he said, "You didn't elect us to follow your lead. You elected us to lead, to do what we believe is in the best interest of this country," and that's exactly what we're doing. And then the reporter elaborated a little bit about something with Planned Parenthood and stuff like that, and she tried to accuse him of being against that. He said, "I'm not against that at all. I'm against you asking the government to pay for it." And all of a sudden, it opened my eyes and reminded me what all of this is really, really about. Most people in this country have a live and let live attitude. Live your life, et cetera, et cetera. So what's the uproar about?
Voters are desperate for leaders who command with clarity, backbone, and a definitive sense of direction. Someone the public can actually respect. Lately, however, the DNC is being accused of doing the exact opposite by constantly playing defense and flip-flopping under pressure from the loudest voices on social media. Instead of projecting a consistent, inclusive vision that reaches out to all Americans, especially minority communities, the party looks like it's being held hostage by its own fringe. That perception of weakness is fatal. It makes their entire platform feel disorganized and untrustworthy. Over time, it sends a clear signal that the party will fold to any radical demand, regardless of the national interest. True leadership requires balancing diverse opinions while staying anchored to principles that serve every citizen, not just the most vocal activists.
You're saying this is where your taxpayer dollars is going to. And when that happens, all of a sudden, that gives everybody the right to speak up and say, wait a damn minute here. How is that possible? I know of a young lady that's a friend of mine that got in a car accident in LA and literally needed to be treated, etc. And her bill was very, very exorbitant when she got treated at the emergency room and stuff like that. And she was trying to get on the phone, get some assistance, et cetera, et cetera. They literally told her, if you were a migrant, it would be easier to take care of you. But the problem is that you're an American citizen, so you have to wait in line.
For the hardworking taxpayers who have been funding this country for decades, seeing newcomers receive massive benefits without ever contributing feels like a slap in the face. It sends a demoralizing message that the people who built these systems are being demoted to second-class status while others cut the line. Regardless of the official talking points, the public's perception of unfairness is driving a massive wedge in the country and destroying faith in the government. Critics argue this isn't about being anti-immigrant. It's about being pro-citizen and ensuring that our policies don't leave the American family behind. When people feel like strangers in the systems they've supported their whole lives, it creates a level of resentment and distrust that is nearly impossible to repair.
You're an American citizen, and you're being told you have to wait in line in the United States of America in favor of somebody who's not an American citizen, who crossed the border illegally, that is going to be treated better because it's a sanctuary city, that is LA, and a sanctuary state, that is California.
This is precisely why a massive wave of Americans is walking away from the Democratic Party. When the electorate feels like their hard work doesn't count, the frustration turns into a political revolt very quickly. If these grievances continue to be ignored by the elites, we are going to see a permanent shift in voting demographics that could last for a generation. For the Democrats, the mission isn't just about arguing for a policy. It's about fixing the broken heart of their relationship with the American worker. If they keep ignoring these warnings, the 2026 and 2028 results will be even more devastating than the last. The American people are sending a final warning. Their patience has expired, and the next few elections will prove it.
How do you think that's going to vibe with most Americans? I don't care what city you're in. I don't care what state you're in. Basically, what nation you're from. If you are a native of that country and you're being told you have to wait because they're favoring somebody who's not a native, who crossed the border illegally, you're going to have a problem with that, no matter who you are or where you're from. So understanding those kind of things is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about common sense.
Donald Trump built his entire political identity on a single, unshakable pillar: America First. That slogan resonated with millions of voters who felt like the globalist elite had sold them out years ago. His aggressive stance on border security, his willingness to disrupt international norms, and his America-only trade policies all reinforced that brand. From confronting China over decades of trade theft to prioritizing American manufacturing, Trump has consistently signaled that the national interest is his only priority. For a massive portion of the country, that level of unwavering focus on the American worker remains an incredibly powerful and decisive reason to stay in his corner.
You can't have stuff like that happening and think that there's not going to be major noise and friction and polarization in the country when you let something like that happen. There is no way that that's going to fly. I think most Democrats know that. The problem is they've surrendered to the extreme progressive left because they're fearful that they will lose their power positions if they don't. I think that's what the problem is more so than anything else, and that's what's going on in our nation's capital.
When you look at the big picture, it's obvious why the American public's anger toward the Democratic Party has reached a boiling point. Citizens are tired of seeing policies that prioritize undocumented migrants and special interest groups while their own families are left to deal with the fallout. From the healthcare crisis to the attacks on our police, there is a growing realization that the current leadership doesn't value the people who actually keep this country running, and that is fueling a deep sense of betrayal. Radical figures like Mamdani are effectively driving moderate voters straight into the arms of the GOP. Commentators like Stephen A. Smith and Bill Maher have diagnosed the problem. Ignoring the average American is a recipe for political suicide. Meanwhile, Trump continues to dominate by keeping his message simple: citizens first, always. For the voters, it's not about woke ideology. It's about results, accountability, and putting America back on top. If you're ready for the truth that the mainstream media won't tell you, smash that subscribe button and join the Woke News USA community right now.